first of all, we're going to be using kind of like a traditional, typical tier list ranking system, S, A, B, C, D. Are we ranking this strictly on coolness? Like, because I think it can be different for every person, right? Is it about coolness? Is it about its impact in the plot of when it was used? How do you assess what is S versus what is D?
I would say a good portion of it would be the importance that it is, not only to like the story, but to be a Force user. I think that's probably how important is it to have this particular skill or this ability, and then the remainder of that weighting would be for how cool is actually that, and it depends if there's something that's like, okay, maybe it's not important to have, but man, that's a cool thing, then I think we're okay, so I think we have to be a little bit flexible on how we determine that.
Basically just a balance then, like between cool factor and also the essentialness of the Force ability.
Yeah.
Force pull. Obviously, you can infer what this is from the name of it. Force pull, if you were curious, first debuted in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke is calling his lightsaber to him. I believe this is referencing the scene on Hoth when he's hanging upside down.
Imagine that being the first one we talk about. Really weird.
I know, right? I feel like force pull is a valuable force ability. It doesn't have a lot of like wow factor, but
Right.
it's kind of like an essential thing, I think, in pretty much every Star Wars film, with the exception of New Hope. My gut is telling me like slightly above average, but what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, you and I are basketball fans, right? So there are this thing called fundamentals, right? That every basketball player should have, like dribbling, passing, bounce passes. I think force pull and a couple of these other ones is the fundamentals of actually being a force user. That would be probably one of the first things that I'd do if I determined that I was force sensitive. Like if my drink was a little too far, just kind of do one of these and then snap it, get it, or the remote control or my phone, whatever. Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely an essential, not a ton of wow factor, but also important, to be a force sensitive user. I mean, I'd throw it like somewhere like right in the middle, like a B, high B, somewhere around there. But to at least start, I wouldn't put it anywhere higher than that though.
Yeah, I'm good with starting with this on the B tier, and that also kind of like gives us a starting point to go either up or down from the middle. And we reserve the right to maybe move these around a little bit
Of
at
course.
the end. Force barrier. Now, this is one that we definitely don't see as much as force pull, but the notes we have here describing what is probably what I would think the most well-known occurrence of this when Kanan in the show Rebels. Apologies to those of you that are animated Star Wars fans, and also you should watch Rebels. When Kanan is shielding Ezra from the explosion, and I think the statute of limitations has expired on the outcome of that scene, but you might infer what happens, that Kanan, in fact, does make a sacrifice in that scene. And so he creates that barrier. 07s for Kanan. Does create that barrier, saving Ezra. I feel like for this one, I place a lot of emotional weight on that scene, because when I think about this ability, I do think about that scene. I guess it does somewhat fall in the same category as force pull of it being like a not really an offensively minded thing, but something that is intended to be kind of an essential in times of crisis, perhaps. Just the cool factor of this feels a little bit bigger for me. Um, I don't. I'm leaning between an A and a B right now. Where are you at with this one?
For the same reasons, I would put it probably at an A, because in the instances that we've seen it used, as you mentioned, we have Kanan sacrificing himself for the rest of the crew there. I believe we also see Grogu use it in The Mandalorian when he's protecting himself it's a little bit more, is it valiant? Is that the word I'm looking for? A little bit more like, it shows more character in the person that's using it, in the instances that we've seen it, So
Mhm.
for that reason, I'd put it at A, just because sure, maybe other people everyone does have this fundamental, but I feel like, the instances that we've seen it used have been more important than just like a force pull.
The next two are actually pretty similar. We've got force choke and force crush. My question about the difference in these two, if I'm a Sith Lord, am I
Yeah.
doing something different mentally when I'm force choking something versus when I'm force crushing something? Like is the mental mechanism different as a Sith
I
for
mean,
those two things?
a choke is like literally like a throat, whatever. So, but if it's a crush, I mean, it's a building, it's a ship, it's a, so maybe the mental capacity is different as far as how much. And I don't know if this works. I'm thinking of like Star Wars games where there's like a force meter, like like you have a finite amount of like force ability, whatever. Um, Assuming that that's how it works, you know, force choking doesn't seem like that difficult compared to like crushing a ship or something. So I would say it's probably close to the same. It looks the same because they're kind of doing the same, hand motion for it. But with the caveat that, crush might be a much larger object
Right. Yeah,
requiring more force ability.
I would argue force crush is more impressive, but
Sure.
force choke is more iconic. Like when you think
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Vader, it's kind of like what you think of being like his main force ability. And so like
Right.
how much weight does that play? I would say force crush is easily at least A tier.
I would say force crush impressive, right?
Mhm.
Force choke, most impressive. Ah, you see what I did? So I would say
Mm.
Force Crush, I would put it A. And because of the iconic nature of Force Choke, I would put that in S.
If you think about it, like force crush is to force barrier as force push is to force pull. They kind of feel like opposites. You know what I mean?
Yes, sure, yeah.
So I'm okay with them being right next to each other on the A tier. Next one is a controversial one,
Yeah.
only because I think we've only seen this twice, as far as I can recall, in at least in live action.
Hmm.
Um, and one of them is in Rise of Skywalker with Rey, and the other one is in the Mandalorian when Grogu heals Grief Karga.
Yes.
Um, I feel like for the sake of the fairness of this tier list, we should probably remove how we feel. I'm saying this to the people commenting right now. I think we should remove how we feel about their inclusion into the plot of this show
Mhm.
or that movie, only because it would be very easy for me to like say, well, force healing is D tier because it happened in my least favorite movie.
Sure.
Uh, but I feel like we should just take it for with what it is.
We will leave the tier list link in the show notes, so you can come up with your
Make
own tier list, and
yeah.
even create a level below D if you want. Throw it in there.
As an ability, I think it's really cool. Like if someone's mortally wounded, you can just force heal them. I mean, that's pretty strong. I'm having a hard time with this one, maybe because of my bias against Rise of Skywalker.
I want to say we actually did see it in The Mandalorian first before we saw it in Rise of Skywalker by release date, I guess I should say. It
It
wasn't, I
says
mean, it
this
couldn't have been.
episode
Uh-huh.
came out on December 18th of 2019. And
Okay.
I think Rise of Skywalker came out that same day, December 20th. So you're right. It did
Yeah.
happen technically before in Mando than
Technically
it
right
did in
before.
the
Wow,
movie.
this is why I remember that. Because I remember seeing that in Mandalorian and thinking, oh, never seen that before. That's kind of cool. At least in live action, like you said. And the next day or the next couple days, you see Rise of Skywalker. And I'm like, oh wait, I just saw that. Apparently,
Yeah.
this is a thing now. I mean, it's very video game esque. You and I like our video games, and so you could just heal whenever you want. Is that what you're saying? Like maybe that's how everyone can get impaled by a lightsaber in the middle of their chest and get healed, because that's essentially what happened to Kylo in Rise of Skywalker. This is a pretty big one. It's hard because the same in that same thought that you had, because of where it is in the timeline of Star Wars. I'm like, because it's so new. Maybe that's why it's just so new that I can't be like, oh, that's incredible, and compared to like Force Choke. Maybe ask me in like 10 years if I think it's more impressive. But I think at very least because of its power, I'd put it at A. No lower than A.
I'm looking ahead at the list and I'm like, man, I don't know how many of these I would actually have on the D tier. And so then my mind went to, if I had to put one of these on the D tier, what would it be? Or even the C
Mhm.
tier? Because I'm thinking like, man, a lot of these are cool. And I'm looking at our next one, Animal Bond, and I'm thinking, I personally think that's cool, but I don't know how much of like a practical thing that is necessarily.
Mhm.
Um, man, is C too low for this, you think?
I think just for the discussion itself, probably one of the weaker ones would be the animal bond because like you said, how practical is it? How often is it used? I think it's super cool. I would love to know what like animals are thinking. What is interesting about this one is that it doesn't seem like everyone really has this ability. It seems like there's only a couple that really do.
If I have to start putting things under what we already have on here, I'm good with C for Animal Bond though. The next one after Animal Bond is also one of those instances of something being relatively new in the live action stuff. And notably something that people, a particular group of Star Wars fans, were incredibly frustrated with the way that Luke's character was handled in Last Jedi,
Mhm.
because following his use of the ability Force Projection to, make himself appear, quote unquote, in physical form to fight Kylo, I guess like that amount of exertion in the Force just kind of killed him. A side note, I don't know if you had anyone in your theater when you went to see Last Jedi who did this, but I had someone in my theater who actively yelled the word "What?" like loud
Yeah, yeah.
when it happened.
Right, right.
I think the ability itself is super cool. I mean, to make yourself appear in physical form on a different planet where you're not. I mean, that takes a lot of strength in the Force because of like the connection with the plot of the film that it does occur in. It is hard to put this as high as just the ability itself probably should be. I mean, this one kind of falls in the same plane of the Force healing conversation we had, I think.
Mhm. Right.
It seems like an ability that would come from someone who is so strong in the Force, but it's associated with a scene in a film that people often hold not in the best light. I think wherever you put Force healing, you probably also have to put Force projection,
Mhm.
because I think just in terms of scale of the I don't want to use the word power, but like strength in the Force that ability requires. Like
Right.
Force healing, literally saving someone from death by healing their wound. Force projection, literally making yourself physically present on a different planet. Like
Mhm.
those are massive things to do. So I think they both have to go in the same tier. The question is, what tier? Do we leave it in the A tier with Force
Mhm.
healing, or do we move both of them to a different tier?
I think for now we pair them together
Mhm.
in A, with the possibility of maybe moving it down to B. So I think we call that maybe an asterisk.
We could put like an extra tier in our minds that's just like the tier of like really cool things that happen in films that are not generally as well received by Star Wars
Right. That'd be
fans.
a very long tier name, just to let you know.
What do we got next? Force jump or leap? I think this is pretty cool.
I think it's pretty cool.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I would easily make the case that this is cooler than Force pull. I don't know. Would you?
I mean, yeah, I would love if I could, that's why I didn't get my NBA career. If I had some force leap going on, force jump, I think I'd be all good. So yeah, I'd put that above force pull, probably on B.
You think, would you put it at the top of B? You said.
I would put it at the top of B.
Okay, yeah. I think I like that spot. I think I like
Okay.
that spot. Force lightning. Ooh, this is to me. This is like one of the most iconic. It's from the original trilogy.
Yeah.
It's a power that's wielded by the big bad ultimate evil of the original trilogy, that and Emperor Palpatine. You see it again in the prequel trilogy with Count Dooku. I guess you see it again in the sequel trilogy with Palpatine again. Somehow, haha.
Somehow.
I feel like Force Lightning is right on par with the iconicness of Force Choke. And I would even make the case it is a cooler ability than Force Choke. There's something about shooting lightning out of your hands that just feels cooler. I'm inclined to put this on the S tier. How are you feeling about Force Lightning?
I would agree too. I'm feeling a little worried that we're both, putting the dark side force powers like above. Actually, I'm not worried that you are. I'm worried that I am. So yeah, I would put it above Force Choke on S because when you see it, you're like, oh, we're in trouble. Like it's like one of those things. If you see somebody wielding Force Lightning, you're like, we got to run. This is not a good place to be.
Yeah, I'm good with this on the S tier. Next one is interesting because I think, as far as I'm aware, we only actually see it one time in the live action films. And it's the scene at the very beginning of Phantom Menace where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are walking down the hall, and there's the destroyers that have their, little shield bubbles that pop up, and they're deflecting the blasters, and then they run down the hall. And I remember watching that film for the first time, and I was like, did something just mess up with the movie? Why did they run away so fast,
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
but that's the moment when they use force speed. Just thinking about it as an ability on its own, devoid from the context in the movies. Imagine being able to use the force to run that fast. I mean, it seems kind of cool.
I think it's a pretty cool one. I mean, you could obviously avoid certain things or run towards the fight or what have you. As far as it being cool, like you said, I think it would just be a cool thing to have. Probably I would put it at B. B at towards the bottom of B, because although it is useful, I think something like a force pull would be more useful.
The next one, you're speaking a lot about fundamentals earlier. I mean, this
Hmm.
is like I'm thinking of like Jedi Padawans in the temple with a blindfold on,
Right.
blocking those little blasters with our next one, which is force reflexes, which ironically in our show notes it kind of has a column saying like where you see it in the movies or in the TV shows. And in the column for this one, it just says most Jedi and Sith.
Yeah.
So basically, like everyone who is force sensitive has quote unquote force reflexes. Do you rank it slightly higher because of its fundamentalness?
Right.
Or is the fact that it's just kind of everyone who's force sensitive does it, so then do you just put it on the D tier, or how do you factor that?
I think we mentioned earlier about how rare like something like Animal Bond is, with what we've seen anyway. And that's setting at the C tier. If you are force sensitive, you do kind of have these force reflexes by association or whatever. Like that's like the first step that you notice. Like, oh, I have force reflexes. I think I would put it at D because of that. If we're doing all the force abilities, any random Padawan to Darth Vader kind of have these reflexes. Maybe certain levels of it, sure, but you kind of assume everyone has it. I would be fine with putting it at D just for the sake of this discussion, especially.
Next up is force push. Okay, how do you feel about this? I'm curious. I want to know if you think force pull or force push is a cooler ability, because I think this one has to go near force pull. I am inclined to say one over the other, and also I would pose this to those of you listening or watching live. Which is the cooler ability, force pull or force push? What would you say, Joey?
Hmm. I mean, I would agree you'd have to put them pretty close to each other on the tier list. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent really between the two. I would say they're pretty much equal in my eyes. So what's your thoughts on, why one is cooler than the other?
It is strictly because of Star Wars Battlefront 2005.
Okay.
The force pull ability, you could get them close to you, and then you hit them with your lightsaber. The force push ability, you had to push them, and then you had to go like track them down, and then hit them with your lightsaber.
Okay.
So the force pull ability is like, okay, I've brought him to me, and now like
Right.
I can battle him. So
That's more of an offensive tactic.
it's more of an offensive tactic, and I'm totally biased because of one game that I played when I was 10 years old. Um, but I would say force pull over force push for me personally.
Okay, but still in the B tier though.
Yeah, still in the B tier. Next up is force sense. Now this is also kind of an interesting one because it's kind of similar to force reflexes in that maybe not to the same extent of that everyone has that, but it's not really something noticeable on screen that's happening per se.
Yeah.
Like the most iconic example of this is Obi-Wan, Sir Alec Guinness in the original Star Wars movie, where when Alderaan is blown up, he has this moment where he's like, millions of voices crying out, suddenly. So it's iconic in the sense that it's something you see in the original film. To some extent, everyone has force sense. Do you know what I mean?
I'm thinking about that scene within A New Hope in Alderaan, and I'm thinking of Yoda also during Order 66. I think that's when he senses it
Yep.
too. But if you really think about it, the idea of it is actually really cool. That
Mhm.
kind of like this universe connected by the Force, you're able to sense those shifts. You could sense those changes. I think it's actually pretty powerful because it gives you it proves that you have a greater knowledge in the Force. I could argue that being something in the B and possibly low A area.
I like the idea of B only because in my mind, I was trying to almost convince myself of the C tier argument, which I don't know if it's there or not. But
Yeah.
the fact that you mentioned A tier and the fact that I was kind of like
Right.
teetering on C, do you feel like putting it in B is a good kind of in between place for this?
Yeah, that would. Yeah, I mean, if it was a hot hangout tier list, I think that I would agree that would be B would be a fair compromise.
For Stasis, this is one we don't see a ton. The most notable and well-known example of this is in, I think, like the first 5 minutes of The Force Awakens, where it's the first time we meet Kylo Ren, and he's shot at a blaster bullet, and he stops it and freezes it in midair. I think that the optics of this are certainly pretty neat.
Mhm.
Maybe not on like the optics level of Force Lightning, but it is, I think, visually pretty stunning. I'm honestly not sure where I would put this one. I mean, B is feeling good, but
Mhm.
I could be convinced of a different tier, perhaps. What do you think?
I think it's again how you said it was perfect. The optics of it is real cool. I remember when I watched that Force Awakens in the theater when he did that. I'm like, that's pretty cool because not only did he do it with his hand, if you remember, he walked away, and it was still
Right.
there. I would probably put that in B just because of how cool it was. Because I really think they pulled it off really nice.
I mean, I'm okay with mid B, like maybe between like Force Push and Force Speed, even. What do you
Okay,
think?
yeah, that's fine.
At the top of the podcast, I alluded to the one where when I saw the name, I was like, I have no clue what that is. Tutaminis is how I'm going to go with. Probably a mispronunciation, but effectively what that is, after consulting Star Wars Wiki, is essentially energy absorption. And the time that you most commonly see this in the films is I think Yoda does it in both episode 2 and episode 3, actually, when he absorbs the lightning from Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones and then absorbs the lightning from Sidious in Revenge of the Sith. I think this is really cool. I think it's like the antithesis of Force lightning.
Hmm.
It is the Jedi's way of defending oneself from the opposition and the attacking of the Force lightning. It's the counter to it, so to speak. but something we have on the S tier, another force ability to just absorb it just like that.
Yeah.
To me, that
Mhm.
feels really cool. I don't I don't know if I would go quite as high to say this is S tier. But I like the idea of putting it on A, but maybe that's too high. What do you think?
I think I would put it at least on A. It's like you said, it is quite literally the defense of Force Lightning. So to have it anywhere too far away from Force Lightning seems wrong. But I still think something like Force Barrier is being able to like shield a ton of people from danger. Force Crush is to like cause devastation in that, and then this Tutaminis or whatever it is, to have it kind of just do a single like I'm grabbing all this energy.
I would say our next two, which are Precognition Visions and Psychometry, are in the same grounds as Force Sense for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess the way I'm seeing that is it seems like Force Sense is the conscious version of what Precognition Visions might
Mm-hmm.
be the unconscious or even subconscious version. And I'll get to psychometry in a second. Let's maybe just stick with precognition for a sec. Is that
Mm-hmm.
cooler, the same, or not as cool as just force sensing?
Probably cooler, I think, because
I think so
it's.
too.
I mean, Luke's vision of Han and Leia in danger. That's when he's on Dagobah, yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
trying to figure out. He's getting the training, and then he senses that now. I think they're going. He's going. They're going to be in danger. Not even that they are at that point, right?
Right,
So it's
right.
more of like a future. Being able to tell the future almost. I think if we're going to go up the B tier, I think it's cooler than Force Speed. I think it's cooler than Force Stasis.
I'm curious about one thing you said before we place it.
Yeah.
In the main two instances that we think about of this being used as a force ability in the movies, with Luke, going to rescue Han and Leia, and with Anakin, both with his mother and with Padme, right? In
Hmm.
all three of those instances, Luke loses his hand, Anakin's mother dies, and
Yeah.
Padme, he kills
Dies.
Padme
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So does that have any weight? That like every time we see this ability used, even though it's kind of passively being used, like not intentionally, I should say, that
Hmm.
it results in bad circumstances. It kind of seems like.
Those move the story along in certain ways. So the use of it in these instances make them pretty great. So
Mhm.
yeah. So I stand by at very least top of B.
Basically, what you're saying is even though their outcomes led to negative circumstances, their role that they played, whether in the movie or in the plot of the movie, like deserves that spot essentially.
Right.
As I understand it, psychometry is basically touching an object and then
Right.
having sort of a force vision that's almost like ingrained into the object itself.
I think just having that ability I think is actually pretty cool. Pretty useful, especially when I feel like the Jedi or the Sith, they're always trying to look for each other. So if you're able to find anything that's owned by them that they touched, a robe, maybe some fruit that they ate, I don't know, like you'd be able to like figure things out a little bit easier. So I think that's a pretty good ability. I could be talk to B or C to be honest.
I almost want to put this top of C. is
Okay.
that is that too low, you think?
No, I think that'd be fine. I almost think you could use it as a tool to tell stories, which I think is almost lazy too. So maybe we're going a little too far out of like the universe, but from a storytelling perspective, I think you could use that as a shortcut, and I don't necessarily like that.
Telekinesis. Now, this is one that feels somewhat building block-ish, like kind of basic, but
Yeah.
also can be cool. Like force reflexes is like, okay, like yeah, everyone has that. You're gonna use it in everything. Telekinesis, there is a optic to that that is cool. Like I'm
Right.
making a boulder float. I'm pulling an X-wing out of the swamps of Dagobah. I know the image is of Rey, I think, lifting boulders. To me, when I think of telekinesis, I think of Luke and Yoda on Dagobah, like teaching him to lift the X-Wing out of the swamp. So there is an iconicness to this one for me. I mean, I could see someone putting it on S just because this feels like the original cool Force ability, like making things float. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I think the coolness factor definitely will carry this particular one up higher up the ranks. Is it iconic enough to make it to S? I mean, if you look at what we have there now, Force Lightning, Force Choke, and yeah, I would put something like telekinesis up there as well. Well, we know it's essential. We know it's pretty cool. Let's put it on S.
All right, I'm cool with this. This one is one of my personal favorites. So I think I will be too biased in my selection for Jedi Mind Trick, partially because I love Liam Neeson. He's one of my favorite actors, and he's apart from Sir Alec Guinness in the original when he's saying to the stormtroopers, "You don't need to see any identification."
Right.
The other instance of this,
yeah,
yeah,
these
they
aren't the
aren't the
droids you're
droids
looking
you're
for.
looking for. Right. And then Liam Neeson, I guess I referenced him first because he's the image we have here on the video version of the podcast. When he's talking to Watto, this to me is such an iconic Force ability, and probably even more so than that, I would say that it's the only ability where you're not influencing your surroundings or perceiving the surroundings because you are influencing another person.
Right.
The rest of these you're influencing like the environment, or you're doing something to the environment, or sensing something in the environment, I guess I would say. This one, because it's psychological, it almost for me puts it up another notch. I would want to put this on S tier because it involves the mind, but I could be talked into putting it lower than that.
I always wondered about this one because mind trick in itself, it's a trick, That doesn't sound very Jedi. I've always had some issues with this particular ability, and I think the iconicness again. I think this is huge. These aren't the droids you're looking for. That's everywhere. What I mean? Like that. If you know Star Wars, that's one of the things you know about Star Wars is that. But would I put it on S?
I like what you're saying about the brand. Like if you asked a non-Star Wars fan, name one Force ability, this is arguably the one they would name. They wouldn't maybe know it's called a Jedi mind trick, but they would say, oh, when Obi-Wan tricks those guys in the white armor, right. When he tells them these aren't the droids. You're right. This is like infused with like the pop culture of Star Wars. Right. I was gonna say A, but I'm kind of leaning towards the bottom of S now that you said that.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was leading because of like no lower than A. But I think S, as far as the importance of this particular ability, just in Star Wars, I think is pretty huge.
Yeah, I like it at the bottom of S personally. All right, last one.
I put this one on purpose.
I was wondering if you put this last on purpose, because this is obviously like at least I'm not aware of any other instance of this. I mean, certainly, obviously not in the movies or TV shows. It's Dyad connection. Now, right off the bat, I know I'm gonna have a hard time with this one because it doesn't really strike me as like a Force ability per se. It's kind of like Force reflexes, but at least with that one, I feel like I like trained to do it. You know what I mean? The Dyad connection one just kind of exists between Rey and Kylo, and obviously there's only one instance of it. I was even reading more on Star Wars Wiki, like, okay, what exactly is a Force Dyad? And it just, it basically just describes the plot of Rise of Skywalker. It's like two Force-sensitive beings share a unique Force bond. They're one in the Force. Their power is strong as life itself. These individuals forming the dyad share a connection that crosses time and space, and so you see them literally handing physical objects to each other through time or through space.
Space, yeah.
Well, my first thing I would say is, oh my gosh, that is so overpowered.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it is something that's like a really strong ability, just on the optics of it. This one is going to be hard for me because episode 9, far more than any other Disney Star Wars film, is my least favorite. And so this is one of the main things that I remember complaining about. I was like, they can just hand stuff to each other through the Force, like when they're not even on the same planet now. Basically, all this to say, my ramble is to say, this is the only time that this has ever happened. It's a one-time instance. We're considering it a Force ability when really it just kind of felt like a plot device, sort of.
You call it like a plot device. I would say it's the same thing too. The ability to kind of like talk to each other in the way that they did in Last Jedi, in Rise of Skywalker. I kind of like that. I'm not gonna lie. Like that was actually just a cool way to not only show you like how they're communicating, but even gave the directors a way to kind of like get creative with it. Because if you remember in Last Jedi, she would be in one place, he would be one place. They would like be looking at each other, but never in the same scene. Which just like that stuff. It was like that type of cinematography, that the way they directed it, I thought was actually pretty cool. Although it can be a plot device for it, I thought the way they executed it wasn't actually that terrible. Now, unfortunately, with that, how overpowered this is, then you come to the end when you're just like, okay, he needs a lightsaber. She's got two, so he, she could, he could like, help that out, and you're just like, well, I guess if I was okay with it, because sometimes you do that with Star Wars, right? You're like, well, if I'm okay with this, I have to be okay with that, So, and I think that's where I ended up being by the time that last scene came, And I'm like, okay, well, I was cool with the fighting, I was cool with the Force time calls. So I have to be able to be okay with this. So I think the idea of the dyad is unique. Obviously, it's the one time that we've seen it. But it can look like it's a plot device, but it can also give some pretty, impressive shots throughout the movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cool. I think it's definitely something that is cool. I think part of my reason that it's hard to get behind dyad connection is that I don't because it's a one-time instance thing, right? It's
right.
All of these other things happen multiple times, at least multiple times, if not all the time. Because this is a one-time instance thing, there's a uniqueness to it. And I think my mind goes to, well, I want to understand that uniqueness. Why does it exist as a singular thing? And for me, that's maybe a bigger critique of the sequel trilogy, but like I don't know why they're a dyad in the Force. They just are, and you're kind of like, oh, how did that happen? They're like, well, they just are. They're both strong, and they're both dyad. They're a dyad in the Force. I think there's a quote in the movie where it's like, I think Kylo says it, where he's like, "I'm the son of Vader, or I'm the grandson of Vader. You're the granddaughter of Palpatine," and you're like, okay, so that makes you a dyad? Like I don't.
Right.
There didn't feel like there was justification or a why behind it. So I guess I'm struggling with: do I treat it as this singular thing because it is? It's only happened once,
right?
Or do I treat it like a Force ability because it is cool, right? It is. I don't think anyone would deny that. So it's hard. If I'm ranking it on the first thing, I think I go D. If I'm ranking it on like just a coolness factor, I mean, I would put it on the same plane as like Force healing and Force projection. I could get behind putting it in A if there is a caveat of if I'm doing if I could like pretend that it's in D.
Yeah, right. how would you feel putting it at either the top of C or the bottom of B? Because of all of that. Because it does have the coolness factor, like I said, but just the way they use it, I thought was cool until the very end, and I'm like,
I like top of C.
Okay.
Also, speaking of Knights of Ren, more criminally underused characters, but
yep, they were so cool.
That completes our Star Wars Force abilities rankings. We will have kind of a blank slate that you can fill out if you want. That'll be available in the show notes of today's episode as well. You can rank these 20 Force abilities. Well, once again, let us know your thoughts on the Force abilities. Also, we had to select from like a really long list. So if there were ones that didn't make our list that you're like, what the heck? They didn't include Force Cloak. Because apparently that's one that Ahsoka uses in Rebels. They're like, oh my gosh, they didn't put Force Cloak on their list. Let us know that down in the comments as well. But